Hello, everyone. The world famous Settler's Lament is here again. And Pirate Dragon, are you new to YouTube? Do you not have functioning eyes? Do you not see the thing that says waiting? Like, do you not see that this is do you not see this as a live stream? I don't know why this is difficult for people to figure out. I don't even do premieres anymore on this channel, so I don't know why you would assume that this is a premiere. This is a live video. We're live streaming right now. So that's just me berating my audience. But we're here today to talk about Vosh, but not really. That's a joke. But I mean, we're normally here to talk about Vosh, but I do actually have something to introduce on Vosh first. To get started, I have, for those of you who are unaware, for those of you who don't watch all of my based Bible studies with Lambuda every week, which I definitely come to them every single week, Saturdays on his channel. Just look up Lambuda Bible Studies. He's not here, so it's not linked. But for those of you who were not watching yesterday, I challenged Vosh to do a Bible study with me and Lambuda, and I'm here renewing that challenge once again. So everyone, tweet at Vosh with the hashtag. Okay, wait, I typed the hashtag wrong in the comment that I left here on YouTube. The hashtag is Settler Vosh Bible Study. I'm deleting the comment I left on YouTube promoting that. But if you go to my Twitter account, you'll see the hashtag Settler Vosh Bible Study. Tweet that at Vosh. Tell him to do a Bible study with Settler's Lament and with Lambuda. So that, I mean, that's not the topic for us today. The topic today is, did Trump do anything? But I just wanted to get that out of the way at the start. But make sure to tweet that at Vosh. This is very important stuff. So hey everyone, how's it going? Does anyone have anything they want to say?
I'm doing pretty good. I just I took a nap over here in South Africa to get ready for so I wouldn't fall asleep. So
okay, sorry. I need to break my audience again. Did it just start? Like what? Do you not have functioning eyeballs? Like, is this the first time these people have used YouTube? Like, what's going on? Why is this difficult?
Yeah. Are they watching something live right now? I mean, do they hear things? Do they see things? You know, it's.
Well, since it seems that videos, the live stream itself, you know, whether or not it's going to be scripted or not, everything, just, you know, in case the title doesn't tell you, this is the stream where we crap on Trump for 2 hours. So that's what's going to happen also.
Yeah. Today we're talking about Trump and what's been going on with him. Okay, the chat is trolling me now. So Patriarch, did you have anything else you needed to say there?
Oh, no, all good. I was just saying, I just took a nap and I'm all juiced up, ready to go. And for those who aren't familiar, I tried getting Settler a girlfriend last night. So I did a stream actually with my wife on my channel where we talked about how to find good trad wives and trad dudes. So you guys can go check that out if you're a incel material. Maybe I can help you be not incel. So go check out my channel.
Yeah, it was a very base stream. I watched the entire thing beginning to the end. Check it out, everyone. But we also have a new guest here, DC Perspective. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm David with the DC Perspective. I make like political analysis videos, and I'm trying to veer more into theory and less cringe and fake stuff. So that should be good.
Okay, cool. So I mean, I guess we can get into the actual topic for today. Does Trump suck? Did Trump do anything? Does anyone want to defend Trump, or does anyone want to attack Trump? Does anyone have any way they want to get started with this?
Yeah, I think the easiest to defend when it comes to the whole thing is the economy. I think that just the energy that he brought to the economy was something that nobody else could. But I don't even know if that in of itself is even a great thing.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to do you want to expand on that at all?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess he clearly was great for jobs. and wages started to grow in the second half of his administration. And I question whether it was that great, though, because who is this benefiting? Most of the jobs that were added to the economy were manufacturing jobs were added in states California, Illinois, and like Georgia, which clearly all voted against him. Too stronger than the last one, but I think that there is clearly a case to be made that his whole administration and his whole time in office was kind of wasted. And go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I don't even know. I think that it was a perhaps in the sense that it pushed the Overton window that it was good. But I was going through a list of his accomplishments that someone had written up. Okay, he built a portion of the wall, but illegal immigration is still 156% up. Since Biden got into office, criminal justice reform was a joke. It was literally just releasing criminals from jail. He made the Space Force, which that just advances the agenda of the global American empire. He defeated ISIS, but we're returning to the 2011 politics. And so that like leaves us with, I guess he was kind of good with the economy. And I think that is like the probably the best defense I can give for Trump.
Levi, you're like economics is kind of your thing. So what's your opinion on the Trump economic record?
I don't really see it as all that important. I mean, as far as the stuff that he actually accomplished, if anything actually was accomplished, to me, the only thing that the Trump did is basically allow people to coalesce a little bit around a slightly different version of the right's politics. And so, I'm not ancient, but I'm old enough to remember the Tea Party. And initially the Tea Party was pretty good in terms of like what they wanted to accomplish. And then it basically just became my taxes and my Second Amendment, which basically just meant, well, then we're just back to the George W. Bush GOP, right? So it got subverted. And I think what we can hope is that maybe the whole Trump figure can be, people can latch onto that to some extent. And I think there's people that are doing that. I think there's people that are trying to push a more authentic family and community-based right-wing mentality that's not just afraid of the so-called big government boogeyman. I think one of the things that he did that was good in that it avoided something was refusing to sign the TPP, like at the very beginning of his administration. So, I mean, I guess you could call that economic in that sense that, he really pushed the idea of a trade war. And my own personal conversations with policy people and stuff is that, this is kind of helping to push actual legislators in the right direction. I think he opened up some room for people like Hawley and maybe the Florida governor, whatever it is, DeSantis. Opened up some room for them to do some things that they might not have otherwise been brave enough to do. Not that they're necessarily doing a lot, but at least, again, it's pushing the meme on the right that George H.W. Bush boomerism is cringe, and supporting the family with actual policy is based in red pilled or whatever. And I think, again, there's some people that I think are latching onto this in the kind of policy wonk space, and potentially in actual people in government and candidates, whether that actually amounts to anything or whether it just falls flat on its face like it always does, until we get to the full on, until basically the New York Times decides that it's time to go kinetic or whatever, So I don't know. I mean, maybe that was a little far, but I don't know. Did he do anything? He hit the pause button and pushed some good memes. is that enough? No. Is it better than we would have gotten otherwise with Rand Paul or Ron DeSantis, or not Ron DeSantis, or Mike Huckabee or whatever? Yeah, probably. But I mean, what's the point in talking about counterfactuals? I mean, it's not realistic. Nothing happened.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I'm sorry. There's one thing you said there that I don't really know what it's referring to. What's the New York Times going kinetic? What does that mean?
Well, I just mean, so kinetic, I mean like, some people are saying that there's a sort of a cold war, a cold civil war, right? This is like I mean, and you even get people like, oh man, not Ben Shapiro, but what's the guy from
Matt Walsh?
No,
Michael Knowles.
No, not those guys. I'm confusing myself. Oh, Tim Pool. There we go. You get Tim Pool pushing this. I mean, he's been talking about this for years, right? This idea that there's like this cold civil war. And so what I mean by the New York Times, et cetera, deciding to go kinetic is, well, it's no longer a cold civil war. That's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. Does anyone have anything to say to what Russell said there?
Well, yeah. Although personally, and this is to both of them. This is to DC and Levy, but I didn't see it as a pause button that he did, more as we think of those other presidents like Bush, Reagan, Nixon. Usually they function as kind of a pause button so things can calm down before the actual government progresses to their next part of the agenda. But really, it seemed like this time it was just a complete accelerant. It was just they just went absolutely crazy. But on the economic perspective, I'd just like to point out that the president just doesn't really have much power in terms of the economy. I mean, the stimulus checks was one thing that he could put his face in front of, and that did have a significant economic effect this year. But in terms of like the actual apparatus, it's like the Federal Reserve, it's the Congress, and it's just like these giant, what are they called? They're just called the omnibus bills that just dump money into all the typical places that they're supposed to go. I mean, what happened is, of course, the markets roared and continued like the largest bull market or bubble or whatever you want to call it in history, but that was probably because sentiment was optimistic, because they knew that taxes weren't going to be raised. So, I mean, that's good, I guess. But who knows? Because like the problem is all the long-term economic problems are just these bubbles that nobody will ever deal with and just continue to mount each time the hands are switched between this figurehead and that figurehead and so on. So that's the economic perspective. But I would think instead of the pause button this time, like Bush or another, Republican, I think it was just an accelerant and like put gasoline in the fire, because it wasn't really what he did, because he acted some of his policies were like Bush, were like, whoever, but the optics were just so aggressive this time that basically the Brahmin class of people that run our society, they just freaked out and they kind of exposed themselves and went just basically insane and went way farther than they would have gone, I think, if had it been a Biden or something boring like Clinton.
But I think you have to pick your I mean, there's just so many things that you can talk about, right? So like, yeah, wasn't an accelerant on like the rhetoric of the left? Yeah, of course. But the thing is, like, I mean, the president does decide who sits on the Federal Reserve Board, and the president does pick the people at the top of a lot of the federal agencies that decide regulatory policy. And so, I mean, if you're going to say that, like, okay, I guess the response could be, well, regulatory policy doesn't matter, and you could just say that, well, the long term is just societal entropy and collapse anyway. Well, if that's the case, then there's no point in even really talking about it, because again, the pause button was policy specific, not rhetoric. I mean, the rhetoric, yeah, I agree with you there. The rhetoric was like totally off the charts and totally unmasking, all of the sociopathy of the left. But I mean, if you're going to try to find something positive, and then I think there's some rhetoric things that were positive, and yeah, of course, like the tax bill, yeah, just the normal, tax cut crap or whatever. But I mean, there were some changes that were somewhat positive, I think, for people with kids on the tax policy stuff. And again, I mean, we're seeing some improvements there too this year, for instance. And so, I mean, I think it has to be specific to certain issues, because some things got a whole lot worse, especially rhetoric. I think some policy things got better or were put on pause. I mean, talk about the EPA, like a lot of the EPA stuff would have been much worse now. But there were some concerted efforts on the side of Trump's EPA that actually did help for a time. And okay, yeah, it's not a long-term deal, but I think again, you can talk about concrete policy changes that sort of amount to a pause or amount to a shift in the right direction, as temporary as it might be.
I think it's safe to say. Just one thing. I think it's safe to say that there will not be very many long-lasting effects of the Trump administration in the literal government sense. Just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying. Yeah.
Sure. Exactly.
I would definitely agree with that. So in terms of long-term effects on the actual structure and function of the state, I think, yeah, his effects are going to be negligible. I think sort of the idea that some sort of black pill people have that, or even conspiratorial types, is like, he wasn't trying to do anything good all along. He was just there to sort of take the energy away. I don't think that's true. I think, and one of the things people do is they'll say Trump was essentially an 80s Democrat, except the thing that made him different than 80s Democrats is he actually tried being an 80s Democrat, whereas I think even 80s Democrats were kind of like, just part of the establishment, so to speak. They were interested in appearing, even 80s Democrats were only interested in appearing to be 80s Democrats, if that makes any sense. So he did try to do some things that I think, were helpful, right? So he did, I mean, regardless of how much of a success it was, we can obviously, as we've all said, the Trump legacy in the government is not going to go anywhere, I don't think. But he did try to curb immigration. Foreign policy was much less bellicose. That was good. Didn't start any new wars, sort of drew back on some other ones. And I'm Mr. Patriarch. I got my own little family here, and I've noticed my taxes go down a bit, and that's also good because it does actually help me. And I'm not rich by any means, and
are you still paying American taxes?
Yes. Uncle Sam follows you around no matter where you are.
That sucks.
So yeah, exactly, which is why I had a vested interest. But I think there were a lot of good things. Also, like what Levi was saying with the EPA and things like that. There were good steps being made, but unfortunately, and the reason why ultimately it will go nowhere is he was trying to operate within the existing system, right? So, and talk about the idea of the cathedral and whatever, trying to rely on the existing bureaucracy to forward your, semi-decent agenda isn't really going to get anywhere and have much sticking power. But I think the best thing that Trump ever did was just sort of inadvertently, and this wasn't anything I don't think he really tried specifically to do, but sort of inadvertently tearing the masks off everybody. And for people on the outside, like I was even talking with my parents. My parents are just sort of like sort of a red state, normie conservative types, and the Trump presidency has been sort of like a big wake up call for them. Not so much for what he did, but sort of the reaction to him. So like, fortified elections, so on and so forth, the media rhetoric getting dialed up to 11. I think if nothing else, the greatest legacy of the Trump presidency are kind of like, maybe even people sort of like us, and also just a lot of otherwise normie people sort of kind of seeing the system for what it is and realizing that, yes, even if you do get somebody in there who does try to do something good, their ability to sort of create any impactful long-term change is going to be negligible. And the system will do everything it can to sort of quash that and, strangle it in the cradle, so to speak. So I think, for that reason alone, I'm a big Trump fan, just in terms of the legacy of, just bringing awareness to the minds of a lot of people, myself included. That's that I didn't sort of become ideologically sort of where I am today because of Trump. But I think a lot of the things around Trump, things that happened in responsive to him, really did go a long way in sort of bringing me to this current situation where I find myself, so to speak.
Yeah, I think most people fit in that category. The results of Trump were not actions that he took, but rather actions that people took in response to him. So, like, you see this in Europe, like Germany's trying to decouple from most of Europe is trying to detach themselves from the United States foreign policy. Nord Stream 2 is being completed. Someone said in the chat that, well, Trump built the wall. But like I said earlier, and you may have not been here for that, illegal immigration is up 156% since Biden came into office. And that is because the gates are just open. I mean, you might have a wall, part of it's not complete. And in other spots, I mean, there's a gate, which is, I'm not speaking in metaphor. Like, the gate is literally open. And that is a result of the bureaucratic class outliving Donald Trump's administration and then opening the gate as soon as he walks away. So, yeah, but now we're just reiterating the same point.
Well, so I have a question for all of you based on what Mr. Patriarch was saying there. So I feel like I'm getting more and more from like the Breitbart end of things, like, hey, look at all these hypocrites in the media, blah, 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 right? And it's like, I feel like they say that stuff more often now because they've got a bigger audience for that kind of rhetoric, right? Or for that kind of pointing that stuff out. But I guess my response to that is always like, okay, yeah, and they're just going to keep doing it with impunity because it's not hypocrisy, it's power, right? And so it's like, I'm glad that Mr. Patriarch, for instance, your parents went from, just like being clueless, or whatever on this stuff to realizing that there is this hypocrisy and this, obviously insanely unbalanced power, relationship between the left and whatever we call the right today. But the question I have is, so when are we going to move past saying, well, look at those evil hypocrites, yuck, yuck, and like, what is the step to getting to people to snap out of this thing and say, like, okay, yeah, well, I'm tired of worrying about who's a hypocrite. I just want to exert political power and figure out how to get it. I mean, is that possible? Is it even reasonable to ask the question? What do you think about that?
Well, sort of, this sort of goes to the next point of sort of what is to be done, right? But I think getting to that point where you can sort of think outside of, you sort of need to get to a point where you're willing to think outside of conventional politics in the first place. And I think the Trump presidency did do that for a lot of people. And now, of course, you're right that doesn't really exactly tell you what we should do next. But I think it does sort of leave a lot of people open to, sort of different ideas about, what we should engage in and how to, is even raising the possibility, is it even possible to get power? I mean, one of the videos I did recently, having a conversation with Prudentialist, as we were talking about this, and sort of my position now is like, I don't think the system of the United States politically is sort of tenable for even allowing any kind of real change from within. The only sort of way to sort of get anything that I think we would like to see is sort of maybe you can do some things with local politics, right? So I think that should be sort of if we are going to sort of focus on political stuff, that should be, I think, where we focus our time and energy, and utilizing local politics, creating parallel institutions, and engaging in lawfare to help, keep the state off our backs and allowing us to operate these little pockets until, something better happens, I think is probably the best we can hope for at this point, unfortunately. But, if you're worried about like fortified elections, at least, if you're local, because at least with national elections in the United States, those are handled at the state level. So if you're able to make your state run sort of more efficiently and sort of less corruptly, and a good example of this, some people say this will never happen, but this actually happened in Florida. So for those who've been sort of kind of aware of the political scene for the past while, Florida used to be kind of like the Georgia of, yesteryear. So it did have some sort of eyebrow raising weird things with the electoral system. But at the good thing that the Florida GOP was able to do was sort of really clean house and sort of make the election system there run more opaquely and efficiently. So, I mean, you could maybe do that, but even, like I said, even if you do get the right president into office, or a decent president into the office, they're going to be checked at probably every level by the administrative state. So I think that puts a hard cap on any sort of reform that we're likely to get.
And you also got to remember about the Florida example you gave. It's like Brenda Snipes was running rampant and made for election after election, failing miserably. And it took there were three consecutive Republican governors which failed to get rid of her, deal with her in any meaningful way. And it took until Ron DeSantis came along. And so I think that proves that it's going to take more than just a typical victory in a state election to do anything. And to get back to Levi's question about, when are we going to move the hypocrisy arguments, like we're calling the leftists are just a bunch of hypocrites. I don't think we are until we figure out a way to get big financial money out of right-wing politics, which is never going to happen. And so calling
somebody's got to shut up Ben Shapiro, right?
yeah, exactly. Calling our enemies hypocrites and losers is very profitable. This is another thing that says all the time, get woke, go broke. And obviously it's not true. The Oscar ratings are down 50%. No good movies this year because the venues were closed for the movies and among other things, so it's these catchphrases that are very easy to put on bumper stickers because they're easily consumed and they're easily sold. And when the right wing, which I think is an embarrassing group of people here in the United States, but when the right wing in the United States realizes that it's an ideological conflict and not one where you just exploit the system and make money, that's when we'll move on from the hypocrisy. So essentially never, I think, unfortunately.
That's good stuff, though. Good way to think about it.
Yeah, so we're screwed. I mean, that is basically my conclusion.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. But I do think, another creative way to look at the Trump presidency in a good way is that he helped transform the optics and the ideas of the GOP in a way that's helping make it farther along in its collapse and its destruction, which would be a great thing. It's because if it's framed in that way, and then the kinds of nationalists, kind of local anti-immigration politics, if that continues, with the movements where, like he passed the baton to the same ones, to the same people that have that same kind of rhetoric, but just continue with that, that's going to split this institution all apart. And basically that would be a populist wing that would make the typical boring right wing, boomers that you guys are talking about. It would make them unelectable. And that would help further the decline of it. So that's kind of a good result of the Trump presidency.
Well, I think just to tack onto what Settlers Lament said there is like, okay, yeah, we're screwed. Fine. But, we've known that, that we've been screwed the whole time. But the question is, what can you do within the broader decline to, like Mr. Patriarch says here, build your paterfamilias, or, figure out how to take advantage of the collapse itself and turn things around. I mean, you can't give up just because it's impossible.
Flee. Like Peter Hitchens says in Britain, oh, if there are young people here that are capable of leaving, I would recommend they leave before it gets too late. But, that doesn't necessarily mean leave the country itself. But it would mean basically leave mainstream society. That's my personal opinion.
Well, so I think I understand that point of view, and I've heard a lot of people say that, but I think there's the other side of this is like, okay, but there's also the possibility of fighting for the institutions themselves, right? I mean, like when it comes to the cities, like to me, it's like, well, just let the cities fall apart, and then we'll come in and buy up the property when it's cheap in a generation or two. But it comes to things like academia, for instance, right? It's like, okay, well, what do? Do you run away, or do you try to get yourself and your friends into the bureaucracy? I mean, and whether or not that's even possible or practical, I don't know. But I mean, I feel like it's something you got to at least explore, depending on the institution you're looking at.
I do believe that sort of trying to establish and take institutions that we can is important, but academia is one thing which I think is incredibly far gone at this point. I wish that there could be some possibility of retaking the universities, but at this point, other than perhaps some like religious universities, they're so far gone, and the leftists are so paranoid of any sort of infiltration from right wingers that I think it's I think the ship has sailed, at least on that. I think that a while ago.
That's probably true. I just think that I think to some extent you have to talk to people who have been in academia and worked through it. You know what I mean? Not just I mean, we've all been students, but I mean professors and people who have gotten up to the level of maybe dean or something like that, because they understand the animal in a lot of different ways that students really don't understand. Students don't get a feel for while they're there.
I don't understand what you guys mean by. I don't mean to be too black-pilled, too pessimistic, but I don't know what it means for like academia to be too far. Yes, I do actually, but I don't know what I don't know what it means to be. Before I say that, the other tangents you were saying, if you're going to focus on the long-term entropy and just like how the mainstream is just so distraught and it's just destined for decline, why would you be interested in the short-term stuff? It's because I have to have something to talk about in the short term, but
well, something to do is what I would say. I mean, I'm with you, but like something to do, like forget about talking about it, let's do it.
Yeah but with this specific issue, I don't know what it means for academia to be too far gone when literally like the core of the state is a hidden state church. And that literally is like most of academia. So it's like literally the epicenter of the total state. And we're going to go into the absolute nucleus of this, global homo, cringe, terrible place. We're going to go right into the nucleus of it and just go from there. I mean, they've literally even got forget about infiltrating the mainstream institutions. They've got operatives and subversives in all of our religious institutions and our religious universities to corrupt half of the staff there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the thing is I guess the reason I'm even saying this is because I actually saw a serious person, someone I consider influential and a serious person on Twitter, saying to basically criticizing a guy who I know who was booted out of his university and given a severance, for thought crime, basically. And this guy was criticizing him, saying like, "Oh, well, you should, this is just this defeatist attitude. You should, we gotta figure out how to take this over." And so I replied, and I was like, "Well, okay. I mean, you can't fault this guy because he's just one guy. What's he supposed to do? And by the way, what's your grand plan?" No response, right? So I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but it's like maybe I just don't know what the plan is, or whatever. Maybe there's some kind of secret plan out there with the people that are much higher up than I'll ever be in academia to talk about all this. So that's
Right.
I'm just opening up the possibility of it, right?
Well, this is all the whole point of it. Is like it's supposed to be, okay. So the mainstream and the state and the liberal state does an action, and then we do a reaction to that and everything. And it's like, well, if you do no reaction, well, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
It sounds crazy to say that, exactly. So I completely understand your perspective there, because they're just going to seize everything, but they were going to seize anything anyway. But also, that's kind of really the issue here, because all the reactions are scaled in a way and only allowed through filters that make it impossible for the reaction to really take over. But they're always just used as a justification for farther action from them. So that's why I'm putting Trump into, is Trump is this rhetorical boogeyman that really allowed them to justify going farther than they would have had he not entered the political system. And so that's kind of a problem we have, where whatever reaction happens is always releasing gas out of a valve, but it's used to farther push the engine down the road.
Well, so despite the decline of society, my daughter still has to go to ballet, so I got to take off. But, hopefully I'll be on the next one with you guys.
Yes.
It was a pleasure meeting you, man. You have a good one.
Yeah, it's good meeting both you guys.
One quick question: are you still doing that podcast? I have it linked below.
No, I'm not doing it anymore. I just don't have time. If you want to look at stuff that I'm doing, check out leoinstitute.org. We have the next issue of our magazine that I edit will be coming out in the next few days. So, and this issue will be on family. So, and I'm not writing anything big for it, and I'm not writing any long form content for it. So it won't be me. It'll be other people who can write and communicate better than I can. So
hold on. You're asking us about what's going to be effective. It seems like you've got that covered. We're here. Seems like you're doing it right now.
Maybe. We'll see. Hopefully we're successful with all this, the director and myself, and we've got some plans. But
no, I was talking about the ballet.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I have 3 children. I guess that's something. Yeah, you're right. And the ballet. She loves ballet, so that's good.
Based.
Very high culture. See you guys.
Peace.
See you.
Yeah.
Okay. So where does that leave us?
Well, I like what he said regarding the institutions and talking mainly about academia, like it being too far gone, but in that there's a greater message, which is we need to look at these things as individual institutions and not just say the elite institutions, which encompasses all of society, because some of them are more vulnerable than others. Whereas Hollywood, I think, would be just a waste of time to even try, which is what the Daily Wire is doing in their own idiotic way. I think providing an alternative form of art is adequate to dealing with Hollywood, whereas maybe in some universities there are ways to circumnavigate a lot of what what they're pushing. And religious institutions are relatively conservative, and there are some private schools which are using old curriculums which are still adequately pro-America, in the sense that America used to be pro-America. So I think it's a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, I generally agree. It's just wait for the destruction. And once you stop reacting, what really happens is that they just run off the cliff, and like they reveal, like you were saying, the nucleus of the fake religion that is the state. And some people have been noticing the fake religion forever, or not forever, but I know that The Revolt Against the Elites was a book written in 1997. They talked about it. Paul Gottfried talked about it in 2002 in a book he wrote. And I think that it's becoming abundantly obvious that this talking point of, oh, well, the bureaucratic class is literally just sees Dr. Fauci as God and George Floyd as a saint. You know, it's a mainstream talking point because of how obvious it's become, because they have accelerated to such an extent. And, you know, I wish there was more tangible solutions, but I'll say what I said on another live stream I was on with the Prudentialist and Jason the other day, which is that you need to identify what the problems are in your life and in your area of influence, then every day make conscious decisions to improve whatever that might be and to reach whatever it is you think would make the world a better place. And then ultimately that's how you see kind of more of a ripple effect throughout society. And it's really sappy and perhaps a truism, but I think truisms are like truisms because they're true, if that's worth anything. So that's where I'm at. That's my political strategy going forward.
Levy's like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And then he's literally like, oh, I have my several children, and we're like making them really based and religious and stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, that's that's what we're gonna do. And as you were saying, truisms are truisms because they're true, and that's why obviously we would say something like progressivism is religion. And technically you had the little heresy there because Dr. Fauci is not God. There is no God. He's only a high priest here. So you had a little theological error there, but
Bad.
No, I'm kidding.
Sorry, I haven't read the woke. I haven't read the woke Bible.
Well, the whole point is that it's fluid and everything, and the reason why we would say elite institutions is because really that there is, the state. The whole point is the state is like run oligarchically and bureaucratically, so it's this weird consensus between them where, well, okay, why does Hollywood and why does academia and why do the press and why do half the people in FDA like all agree all the time and everything and converge, even with the next new topic or new issue that's coming up this year, they all seem to absolutely coincide. Well, it's the same Brahmin class that like inhabits all those elite institutions, and they're all basically part of the state, pushing together. So it sounds weird to say, oh, all the elite institutions, all of them, instead of just pointing out each and every one, but they seem to be just reinforcing each other more and more, and it's just this weird cult of power. And it's hard to break a cult of power because there's no one node to it. It's just all kind of decentralized.
Yeah. Recently, this past week.
Okay. First, I'm going to interrupt. We have a comment here that totally destroys all of us with facts and logic. So I want you guys to respond to this. Honestly, the dissident right fetishizes micro-level solutions. Having a family is noble, but making policies to incentivize family creation results in far greater change. Whoa, destroyed with facts and logic. Respond.
How do we get those policy incentives?
We just
like, dude, we're like
that's the whole problem, right?
Something. I guess. Have you been listening?
I mean, like, have you been paying attention outside? I know that you can look at the next election chart for your favorite state election that you're following for 2022 and 2024 and 2026 and 2028, blah blah blah, and everything. Dude.
Yeah.
If you don't get it now, honestly, I don't know when these people will get it.
Well, okay, so I see where he's coming from. The kernel of wisdom I would see in this is that the idea of us. So I think micro level solutions. I think if you just sort of focus on you and yours, that is a bit of a problem, right? So I do think we should be networking and making things happen in the real world. I certainly agree with that. Because, if you are just sort of, the based and red-pilled family, I mean, that's great, but, it kind of starts and stops with you and, your lineage, essentially. So I do think we need to be active in the real world, but I think we need to do things that are possible, right? So it would be great if, we did have some sort of authority within the state and we're able to wrestle control away from the current managerial class and blah blah blah. That's all true, but I just don't see how that's going to happen is the problem. So kind of what I advocate, and I made as far as sort of what to do, I made a video responding to sort of academic agents on this, and where I live in South Africa is kind of, I think, the future a little bit. So what you have is a situation where if you're really poor, your life's basically shit, essentially, because the government services you rely on are continually degraded. Electricity goes off sporadically, things like that. You're lucky to get a social grant and blah, blah, blah. The hospitals are garbage. In a lot of the country, you're given fraudulent criminal education, quote unquote. And everything sucks. But the people who are able to have sort of a decent life down here basically have kind of privatized everything, right? So they have sort of parallel institutions sort of up and down the line. So in terms of security, in terms of education, in terms of health, healthcare, you name it. And it would be a mistake, though, to say that all this just happens from people doing things and like not paying the government any mind. So what makes decent neighborhoods and towns and cities different from the shitholes is that essentially local government does at least provide some cover for people to
Stop
run.
swearing, dude. This is the Christian
Oh,
channel.
sorry. But the local government, either at the ward level, municipal level, or even at the provincial level, in terms of the Western Cape, sort of the most functional province, they give some degree of cover for people to operate in, essentially. And for those sort of within and without, there's a lot of lawfare that gets engaged in, right? So there's organizations like AfriForum, which are basically suing for basically their right to exist, essentially, in terms of having these parallel institutions and whatnot. And I think that's very important. So what I think we're going to need sort of going into the future is to sort of look to maybe some of the things that are going on here and try to adapt that to the United States. So what'll happen with that is the country will go to the dogs, but you'll be able to preserve communities and localities that are more or less functional, and we'll be able to sort of withstand, I guess, sort of the worst aspects of the collapse. And whenever reform does come, they'll be there, essentially. And will serve as hopefully a breeding ground for something better to come out of. So I think that's kind of what we need to be looking at. And there's a lot of things that we could do, but haven't done. So there are legal organizations in the United States which exist, but I think sort of consciously trying to network and join all these together, I think would be of great benefit. Like an idea I had was to create something. This is just me spitballing, walking around in the grocery store, thinking about what can we do. But like, what if we made something like the Western or the Western Endowment for the Humanities or the Christian Endowment for the Humanities, right? So we get an organization together which functions sort of like the National Endowment for the Humanities, but it's funded by us and promotes things by us and sort of helps facilitate networking businesses, networking private education, networking lawfare organizations and stuff for, you know, our purposes, essentially to sort of help create that, parallel society. And also, again, it can also be used to help spearhead local political action as well. So I think those are sort of the things that we should be looking at doing.
Wow, so true. But but literally I agree with all of that. And it doesn't have to be literally you hide away with your family and you just homeschool them and you only go out to go to the grocery store or to mass. Although that's completely exactly what I want to do. You know, the local community stuff is probably the scale at which you could actually do anything of import at this point. You know, and then we can have our if you want to do something else, you could dig out the catacombs. We'll have our based catacombs, and we'll have the underground society with our parallel institution and our, and our like wealth that we store together and whatever, and in our commune, whatever, But basically, that community level is really going to be where it matters, especially for the next decade, 2, 3, 4 decades.
Well, okay, Mr. Patriarch, as our resident Africa specialist, what are the chances of, I don't know, what are the chances, do you think, if we were to all move to Uganda and try and turn Uganda into like the trad paradise? How do you think that would turn out?
Uganda?
Yeah, Uganda.
Well, you'll be happy to know that Uganda recently put restrictions on pornography. So they're already pretty based by Western standards, I guess. So
yeah, no, exactly. It's just we could just like develop a Western. No, this is not Patriarch Prime. Unantico.
Yes, I am not.
This is a YouTuber, Mr. Patriarch.
Yes. I am aware who he is, though, but I am not him.
Yeah. But yeah, no, yeah, I don't know. Just I mean that was a joke, but in my Discord server, the Ugandan solution has been a meme for a while, I guess.
The Ugandan solution. That well, the thing is the last time they tried that seriously was called Rhodesia, and it didn't end so well, essentially.
Well, no, I don't mean like that. I just mean like, I don't know, creating a like Amish community in Uganda.
Oh, well, that might be able to work. There are there are sort of settler communities, so to speak, all over the world. And there are like Mennonites in Ukraine and Germans in Russia, and they have their own little sort of communities and whatever. I think if you did want to sort of create a life in a community that was sort of free from the or as free as might be from the reach of globo homo, basing that in Africa might not be the worst thing in the world, particularly in the rural areas. South Africa is weird because in the urban centers you have a lot of, it's very kind of uncivilized, a lot of violence, a lot of deracination of the Bantu tribes when they sort of come to the cities. In the countryside, it's, depending on where you are, it can actually be very peaceful and nice. So the people are, a lot of them are poor or whatever, but they sort of have they maintain their sort of cultural identity and mores and family structures and whatnot a bit better. So yeah, I mean, you could conceivably, Settlers Lament could literally start the settlers settling project in Uganda or somewhere. Yeah, I could see that. Sure, why not?
I'd rather go to like Nicaragua or something.
Yeah, I mean, I considered like South and Central America, but they're a lot more influenced by liberalism. Most of South and Central America has same-sex marriage already.
Meanwhile, Uganda's banning porn.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for how long though? I mean, how long until France is able to fully influence again? I know they're trying to get their corporate control, their semi-colonies through corporations and investments. So
Uganda, I know, is a little interesting in this matter because what happened is they had sort of a period of liberalization. I'm just talking about the pornography issue specifically. They had it sort of a period of liberalization, and then I think they sort of saw the effects on that, and then they sort of clamped down on it again. So I'm not sure sort of long term what's going to happen. The tentacles of the regime are long, and they want to grab everything. So yeah, I don't know.
And so
I don't know
that's
how
why
well
yeah.
Africa's.
Yeah, and that's why I think Donald Trump was an okay president.
Yeah. So I guess I'll do a super chat quickly. We only have the one. Zach for $5. How is my favorite snow person doing? P.S. Can't watch the stream right now. Okay, I have no idea what he means by snow person. I'm going to assume he means because I'm Canadian.
Yes.
Or does it mean me because I'm Alaskan?
Yeah, that works too. Do you know this guy from your chats?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't believe so. I think I might have seen him comment somewhere, but I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I try to ignore the chat as much as possible, and I actively try to forget everyone in it. So I don't know. I don't really remember a Zach from before. But yeah. So I mean, if you're referring to me as a Canadian, I'm always doing better when I got a £5 super chat. So you can know that for at least. I'm also always doing better when I think of the greatest country in the world, Uganda. But yeah. So guys, I don't know, what else do we have to say?
Well, I mean, we haven't said enough about how he was actually the worst president ever. He was Trump, and he was, I don't know what DC is saying about how he was an okay president when, I mean, I said it before in the stream, but it really was an accelerant where they've been doing, things out in the open that are basically unprecedented and are kind of masked off, and it was only made possible by the idea of Trump being the evil tin pot, boogeyman. Oh yeah. Well, give me something against it then.
Well, I mean, it started in 2012. It started before Trump. Trump was a reaction to a lot of that.
Well, yeah.
That's why you saw people like Milo Yiannopoulos were much more successful even before Donald Trump was on the scene. Though the peaks coincided. So Milo peaked in like 2015, and Donald Trump obviously peaked in 2016. But I think this idea that Donald Trump was the accelerant, I think it was a side effect, and I certainly don't think he slowed it down. But I think the acceleration was inevitable based on the stuff we had been seeing since 2012. The Democrats were fully confident that they were never going to lose another election post-Obama 2012. And so I think, and add that to the populist sentiment on the left wing, which was being curbed by, I hate to use the term, but identity politics, intersectional politics, and what the left does now. So I don't think that Donald Trump was really this like big boogeyman that accelerated the collapse. I think that he's just, he's there, and he may have added a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, I think that everything that we're seeing now was down the pipe anyways. Like, take the Russia escalation that Biden is marching towards at the moment. Hillary Clinton was certainly going to get us into a similar situation. She had won in 2015, and I know that's geopolitical, and so it's not directly like, but I think the themes carry over. The sentiment is the same. I think Donald Trump paused to that and to their geopolitical advancements, But you're right. I guess I don't think he put a pause to their rhetorical advancements, but I don't think that it would have changed either way. It's back to where they were going, and where they want to be is where they're going to get, because they are the powerful. They are the ones in control.
Ooh, 21st reaction destroyed by.
Well, I don't even get a chance to respond yet, but
I mean, it's already been destroyed.
Oh, too late. Yeah. No, I agree. Well, of course, yeah. I mean, the kind of stuff that you might be thinking of started in 2012, and he's a reaction to that and everything. But my point there is that it is technically kind of mixed, of course, where it's like multiple of these things. at the same time that he's ineffectual, he's also the paper tiger that's like, barking and growling or whatever, and they're freaking out about it and thrashing because of that. But that's the whole problem, is that he's really is the perfect example of like an outer party, gas valve, microcosm, like all happening in one place, where he's got the strongest rhetoric and probably the farthest someone could talk the talk in like 21st century America, and at the same time he's completely ineffectual and he doesn't know what he's doing, and all of his like really vicious enemies are just retaliating against him, and he just has nothing to do against them because he basically has no power. And then while all that is happening, and literally like this insanity is happening, he's towing the one thing that the right wing, GOP controlled opposition always tow, is that I'm powerful, I'm actually doing stuff, I'm effective, the state is not completely corrupt and falling apart, and I can't do anything about it. They never ring that bell ever, otherwise their grift would be forced to stop. And he contributed to that, and that's like the severest problem.
I think that he did. I have a follow-up. I want to ask you a question, but I think that he did more to awaken a lot of the people to the deep state and to the bureaucratic class, managerial elite, whatever you want to call it, than anyone else. And have your thoughts about that. But I want to know: do you think that Donald Trump was even worth it? Like,
yes.
Okay.
Well, and the reason I say yes is because if you look at sort of funding of think tanks and NGOs in DC, the way it always works is whenever the opposition is in power, that's when they get their funding. Essentially, that's when they get the lion's share of their funding, right? So if you're some sort of, voting, let's just say voting rights at NGO, and you got a Republican president in charge who's like making noises about like voter ID or whatever, and then you really lobby, and then you get like tons and tons of money from the Tides Foundation while he's in office, and then when he's gone, then your funding dips back down a little bit. I think what we saw with the Trump administration is sort of that sort of election cycle phenomenon sort of play out on steroids. So you had like literally everything sort of blow up, and the reaction to him sort of kicked up to 11. Because like I agree, DC perspective, what we're seeing now is not new. It's sort of like it really sort of got going, like I said, like you say, around sort of 2012. But I think it would be a mistake to say that the Trump presidency didn't sort of kick that into overdrive. I think it absolutely did. And I think that's a good thing, because yes, it does sort of bring the boot down a little bit harder on the back end, which is not good. But the speed at which sort of all this happened, I think really sort of snapped a lot of people sort of out of their dream state a little bit. And, whether it comes sooner or faster, I mean, the boot's coming down anyway. So I guess I'd rather sort of know who my enemies are ahead of time instead of like later on down the line, where I'm living in some sort of like dystopian
in like the city.
Yeah. Basically, I'm living in Blade Runner and still like hoping that the GOP will like make it happen this time.
That's literally where we are. We're cyberpunk dystopia. The violinists are the real transforms. but no, I would agree with Patriarch in that basically no matter what, the boot is coming down, and only like a minority of the population will understand that and everything. So the fact that minority of the population got red pilled on the deep state and media and that kind of stuff, that is something that made it effective. I mean, to me, I'm thinking about 10, 20 years where if it wasn't going to happen in 2012, and then, Trump makes it worse, no matter what, it was going to come along in 2024 or 2028 when the next wave of that was going to come. So if it came earlier, it doesn't really matter much to me. So yeah.
Where do you guys think we go from here?
Hide.
Does the Republican ever get into office again?
Oh yes, and they will
maybe.
support they'll support basically very left wing things basically. So yeah, so Republican will get
gay marriage is a conservative value, basically.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but one of the British MPs said, "I don't support gay marriage in spite of being a conservative. I support gay marriage because I'm a conservative."
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically.
just paste that onto whatever next iteration of the literal cyberpunk dystopia. Like,
by the way,
we
I'd like
need
to remind the Canadian government that I endorse that comment entirely about gay marriage.
Yes.
But yeah. So I don't know where do we go from here? Does anyone want to answer that?
I guess that's all I'd have to say there is just kind of draw it back to sort of what I was talking about earlier with like local politics, real life action, organization. Like we need right wing community organizers essentially, like because we don't really do any of that. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. So if you look at one of the ways that the left is so effective, like get a bunch of people who think sort of outside the box, so to speak, sort of the dissidents, sort of get them all together and organize them. Like let's unionize the deplorables to a certain extent, right? I think that could definitely pay dividends, and it's not because I think we can save America with this. But it's because we can hopefully carve out, and I don't mean like in a sort of secessionist way, but sort of carve out a space for us to sort of live and operate and kind of do our own thing, and hopefully go ahead.
So the New Hampshire Libertarian Project, where all the libertarians moved to New Hampshire. And Tucker Carlson was talking about doing that in Vermont, getting all the conservatives to move to Vermont. He was on his Today Show, his podcast thing, and he was like, "Why doesn't everybody just move to Vermont and take over the government? All the conservatives, I mean, I guess it's plausible, but you'll just get. I mean, that would be like returning to a more fair system where the federal government doesn't have power over every aspect of the state. I don't think you're going to get there, and So I guess you're right, though, forming community bonds. But I kind of was referring to in a more not so much individual basis with what are the right wing dissidents going to do? I meant like what is the path of the nation for the next 30 years? Now I know 21st century.
So like America as a whole, essentially.
Oh, yeah. I do.
Yeah,
I really do. Well, first of all, the other guys, the other question you were answering, of course, what you guys said was wrong. What I say is hide, leave, exit. And but you said the community organizers, there are public figures, distant figures that are like competent. There are actual community organizers out there. And if you can support them covertly, that would be effective. But just,
But okay, 21. But like you keep on saying this, like leave. Okay, yeah, go to like rural Montana or whatever. And what about when the federal government starts dominating rural Montana's politics?
Yeah,
and starts forcing all the bad stuff.
No, but
there.
I'm saying you don't leave anywhere to a physical location. It's just an interior exit where. Basically, I say their control is everywhere. So rural Montana, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
But the whole point is that it's literally just an atomized cyberpunk dystopia society. So you can exit directly from your own home because you're not connected to like any larger social institution and everything. Those have all been eaten up by the
I do agree with that more. Try and disconnect yourself from the society. Try and live in your own society as much as you can.
I think it's funny that you bring up cyberpunk though, because everybody was.
Oh, I was just saying, your idea of exit, but I think we really should avoid sort of carving ourselves off from like any sort of.
Okay, but that also meant that also meant supporting like the actual religious communities that like will actually sustain over several decades. And covertly, instead of acting, everyone shouldn't act like a public figure. They should all act like hidden drones. And if there are real legitimate people that, you know, do stuff competently on the larger scale, support them as covertly as possible.
Yeah, like, you know, going to subscribestar.com/settlerslament. Uh,
Nice.
You'll have to stop acting like a public figures and being on Twitter all the time. Like, none of this stuff matters. It's like hide away and support the right people and support the right, you know, local companions.
Okay, but I want to do a couple questions quickly. One question, a couple super chats. Zero Kev, did you see the Mold Bug stream on Subversive podcast with Alex? Whoever, he had some interesting things to say about getting married and parenting. No, I haven't seen that, but that sounds really interesting. I'll have to check it out. Has anyone here seen this particular interview?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Yes, sounds interesting. I'll check that out. Darth Calhoun for $5. We need to produce art that is wholesome and based. I'm working on that with a book based on German imperials fighting off communists. Cool. Yeah, I mean, having like entertainment and art and stuff that is not left wing is a good thing. Anyone have anything to say to that?
I mean, yeah, make pretty stuff, but
I agree with
just
that.
do that for you. I think it gets to a point.
Yeah.
Like
The distributist is actually really big on this point, where countercultural art and works like that is something that people can actually do and will attract normies of some variety.
Right, which means it has to be shareable. You know, it has to be something that's actually appealing to people. Not some, like I was listening to some critique of I know the Prudentialist was on with Charlemagne and Aaron or whatever, and there was a video that critiqued, or a video response. It was like 45 minutes long, and it was this person talking about how, you know, make art, but it was some lame anime stuff, and it was so unappealing. You know, it was like, well, what's the point of doing art if nobody's gonna like it? And if it's gonna be so niche, you know, you're gonna sit in your basement and like color on Warhammer 40K, you know, stick figures. I don't know. That might just be me like being too brash or whatever, but I hope my point is getting across. That is,
yeah, no. I mean, I totally agree. We see this especially with like evangelical Christian entertainment. They make the worst of the worst entertainment, and it sells really well because there's a big market that's willing to buy anything that's that markets to them. But if you want like actually meaningful art, it needs to be more than just propaganda for your side.
Yeah, exactly right. And it has to be appealing. Otherwise, you know, the best type of propaganda is propaganda that you don't know is propaganda, right?
Yeah.
So, at least that's what I think. I don't know if that's actually true, but I would say shoot for that. You know.
Yeah. And one more super chat for $5. Trump disabused me of hope for a hero to ride in on a white horse and rescue. We are all responsible for helping renew and rebuild our society. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with that. 4 years ago, I suppose I would have had much more. You know, I mean, my views 4 years ago would have been significantly different. But back earlier in the Trump phenomenon, but back when he got elected, I would have been much more optimistic about specific political solutions. And now I'm much less optimistic about that.
Yes, I think that this like Napoleonic figure, which is going to come and save the day, is relatively far-fetched, because even Napoleon needed an army.
Well, there will be a Napoleonic figure, but it will be within the current framework, the current system, kind of like perhaps an FDR or you know, someone like that, where they're basically becoming the monarch of the current apparatus. But that's
wasn't
just.
I mean, to be
Napoleon-
fair, there's this guy. He's called Joe Biden. He is pretty based, TBH. I'm thinking of reorienting this channel to be a pro Joe Biden channel.
Yeah.
Yes, that's wise.
But yeah, I mean, shocker, guys. Sometimes societies just decline and die. Sometimes that just happens, and sometimes there's big brain people and people with amazing foresight on the periphery that are able to see that that's the trajectory. And sometimes also those people are also unable to do anything about it other than an interior exit. So
It seems oddly
it's not like-
specific for your agenda.
yeah, but the whole point is I'm being oddly specific in that was basically Saint Augustine's position. This guy was, Galaxy Brain wrote stuff that literally is essential to the Western canon and will live with us for the next 1,000 years, as it did for the last 1,500 years for the West. And he saw the city was going into collapse, and he just left. And here we are now, probably in the same position. And just because St. Augustine was extremely influential and wrote profound things and, laid a foundation, that didn't mean the foundation came, right after he wrote it. It came literally 1,000 years later, basically. So yeah, that's basically just the situation we have.
Are you St. Augustine 21st reaction?
No, definitely not.
Damn it.
I'm
Well,
just
the real Saint
Damn
Augustine
it.
would deny you the next Saint Augustine, wouldn't he?
out of humility. No, I just want to have like a crypto funded little microstate.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I mean that is the solution. The solution is be a saint. And I mean I'm half joking about that, but only half joking. And we got another super chat, the Right to Cafe for $5. I need to do Enclave Strategy 2.0. Ever since I started lobbying state governments, my goals became much less vague, and I actually achieved a couple. Well, cool.
Good.
Check that out. Be prepared for that video, guys.
Excellent. I've heard of him. I'm gonna have to check him out. The Right Cafe. All right. But anyways, guys, it's about 1:21 a.m. over here, so Papa Patriarch's gotta go to bed. But it's been a lot of fun talking with you guys. I guess sort of the one thing that I'll also say about sort of my parting shot is that we all sort of know about kind of Moldbug's idea of like the cathedral and whatnot, and how it's all sort of sort of decentralized and sort of a self-reinforcing system, and that's partially why it makes it so hard to kind of make any lasting change, because it's not just it's the universities, it's the media, it's the administrative state, education, blah blah blah, and they all sort of reinforce each other. But the other thing too that I guess I would remind everybody is that all that's true, but there's also a lot of really bad people kind of behind the scenes who have a lot of influence, and unless we're able to sort of get to a point where we're able to kind of acknowledge that and realize that we just gotta have to, and I'm not trying to like be super conspiratorial or something, but I think ultimately what we're sort of stuck in is kind of a spiritual struggle in a certain sense. And like Settler's call to sort of try to become a living saint, I think is probably the best we're going to be able to get. So, righteousness is the best cure to degeneracy. So I guess that'd be my advice to everybody. So anyways, thank you very much, Settler, for having me on. And nice to meet you, DC Perspective, and to talk to you again, 21st Reaction. I'm going to be heading off to bed now. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, and just quick reminder, everyone, make sure to subscribe to Mr. Patriarch. Links to everyone's stuff is in the description below.
Awesome. Good night, guys. Thanks.
Peace.
Pleasure, man.
Yeah, so I got another interesting comment here. This isn't a super chat, but I will still I will still concede to discuss it. Can we talk? Can we just talk about the degenerating effects of technology? Much of all social ills at present can only be maintained by tech. Yeah, I mean, this seems like a sort of classic right-wing critique. It's something we've heard many times, but I still think it's important. Technology really is just destroying our brains. It's destroying our bodies. It's destroying everything about us. Technology is just a lot of modern technology is awful. Social media is a great example of this. It destroys our attention spans. I hate it so much. Twitter is awful. I should quit Twitter entirely. I should delete my Twitter account like Dave did.
No,
It's just
you
it's
shouldn't.
just a waste of time. And it's just, and a lot of technology just messes up your brains in so many different ways. So, yeah, I know. I mean, I've been meaning to make a video so I can go through this, a bit more coherently. But technology does really have many adverse effects on the human mind. Anything any of you guys wanted to say on that?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Go ahead, 21st. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I wish I was base enough to be a complete Luddite. I wish, but I would adjust a statement technically and say technology is just giving us greater capabilities and abilities, and the impulse to destroy ourselves and degenerate was already there, but now it's just given like rocket fuel to act on it more. So it's like with greater technology requires greater absolute restraint and ordering of people, or else it'll just be like it is now, like you say, Settler. Yeah, and that's kind of part of the 30-year aspect, DC, that you were asking, because I would say, this society is accelerating to collapse immediately or whatever, 10 years, it won't last. But what's interesting is that it is the cyberpunk dystopia, in that things that would have just not been sustainable and caused collapse are being put off because of expansive technological capabilities. So we're just getting into uncharted waters there, where there could be an economic collapse from global debt or whatever, or there could be this or that, but it could be social like organizations collapse because of progressivism and like the insanity that they're doing. But it's just made possible by this technology and this stuff that gives us greater capability. So it's literally just going to be like rich degenerate people, like people that have a lot of money and a lot of things, but they're degenerate.
Wow, someone
Perhaps
that
there will be a
does
lot of
it,
people-
that just misses the point. What a surprise! I agree on the problem, but by simple means, any society that rejects technology others possess will ultimately be snuffed out. What a stupid thing to say. I mean, I agree on like the basic point. Yeah, if we get rid of fighter jets, then our society will lose to societies that do have fighter jets. Do you think I was saying get rid of all technology? What a stupid thing to say. I'm just saying there's a lot of technologies out there that having unrestricted access to is harmful. There are a lot of technologies that we need just to survive as a civilization, and even those technologies can have adverse effects. I'm not saying like get rid of all technology. I'm joking. In Kofex, I love you, but don't say stupid things.
I think you're partly right. 21st reaction. It's like, in the sense that there will be a lot of people that own way too much and are just like dumb. But then, like, similar to what Mr. Patriarch was saying, there's going to be people who own nothing and are forced to love it because there's no other option for them. They have to they have to rent everything. They don't own property. They don't own a car. Take public transportation, all of this stuff. I think that will be another group of people, perhaps, and probably the larger group of two people.
Yeah, I completely, you're right on the money there, where, and one aspect, the next 30 years, it doesn't look too terrible for like this Brahmin class of urban professional people, although they'll have like completely deracinated lives without family and everything, and it'll suck and they'll be miserable. They'll be living in their cubbies in these metropolises, and they'll be wealthy and everything, and they'll be okay, and it won't be too bad for them, and they'll be kind of well off. but the middle class is going away, especially with like ridiculous taxes, with ridiculous debt that's going to come down on these people. The middle class is going away, but the bottom pauper, peasant class is expanding. Of course, as they bring people from around the world into America, that kind of servile class of people is only going to expand. And of course, the state of society will be a bit more third world and everything, and the long-term trend of crime increasing in the West will continue with that. So it's like for the average person, it'll be less safe, less effective. The bureaucracies will be like basically incompetent completely. They'll have no wealth, and they'll be happy. No, and then there'll be and there'll be that top 10% of people that are still Hollywood celebrities and still doing stupid
I mean,
stuff.
to be fair, having less wealth would be based.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but having less wealth and living in squalor isn't necessarily something I'm fond of doing. And I think it will be a little bit bigger than 10%. I think it will probably be like a 60-40 type thing, or maybe 70-30. So I'd say work your ass off now to get into the 30 or 40 while you can, and cross your fingers and hope that you're not screwed over.
Yeah, it's not advice, but if you guys are all thinking about the 10, 20, 30-year time span, it's not advice, but if you wanted to, if you hodled crypto, if you hodled Ethereum for 10 years, you might be in that top 30% of like the high IQ ruling class that just
They're
hides
not
away in
IQ.
their gated
That's absurd.
communities.
They're far from high IQ. They're midwits. They're unintelligent.
Yeah, well,
and I'll die on that hill. I don't think that the people that rule us, they're not high IQ. Maybe they were when like Kennedy was in office, but they've totally.
I think Harvard professors that shape, basically those academics that shape the acceptable ideas and the way they frame it and how they set up the critical theory to introduce the next power dynamic that they're going to exploit. I think those people are intelligent, but the bureaucrats and like the politicians are literally like knuckle dragging.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in people like Kamala Harris, don't you? Very unintelligent.
It's excuse you, it's Kamala.
Kamala? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Wow, so xenophobic.
Yeah, actually. I agree. I think the people setting up the academics are not setting. I'm sorry, I've completely had a stroke. The people setting forth the ideas are the perhaps slightly intelligent ones, and I would say they are intelligent, and it is sending it out to their drones for them to go act upon. And me and the Prudentialists were actually texting the other day, and we were talking about trying to find ways to disrupt that. So I don't know if you guys saw it. You probably didn't, but Destiny and this Richard Wolff guy had a very interesting debate over capitalism.
Oh yeah, I watched that.
And that's like, that's who Vosh listens to. That's who the bread tubers listen to. Richard Wolff. That's who informs their economic opinions. And he got absolutely smoked by Destiny. Like, it wasn't even fair. It was honest. Obviously, it was embarrassing. And I think piercing at the heart of the academics and the institutional elite, the ones that set the agenda forth, would be the most I think that it would help the most in exposing the nucleus of the current regime. And I see that as a way going forward to perhaps accelerate the collapse of the current elite class. Doing almost what was done to Charlie Kirk, but only to the academics and the liberals. So going to, the book signings, or if they have lectures where people ask questions, you would have to do it covertly in a way that, you wouldn't get beat up by Antifa. There would obviously be a reaction, and we could go have another stream about this and talk more about strategy in a deep way. But I think that going after that class that sets forth the agenda would be effective in causing some form of cognitive insanity, which we already see within the knuckle dragging class, as you put it. Like the biggest leftist YouTuber only uploaded this is something that the Distributist talks about all the time. He's like, look at who's that one person? The
ContraPoints.
ContraPoints, yes, ContraPoints is like incredibly depressed, potentially on drugs, transgender, male to female, right? Talks about how hard their life is all the time. And it's like, well, clearly this person doesn't have it together. So they're already at that point, but perhaps we could push. Now, I don't want to say push academics into a point of mental decline because that's kind of evil, but push them to a point where their reputations are more destroyed, even in the eyes of, the 14%, which are already the knuckle draggers. If that makes any sense, I hope it does.
Yeah, no, that
perhaps
makes sense. Got another $5 super chat. If God bad, why good things exist? Very true.
Whoa.
So true.
Wow.
And another question: if cutting off funding and aid to universities and public schools was effective strategy for curbing bad things promoted in academia and education curriculums, would that be an effective strategy? I mean, I don't know if we could actually get the political will to affect that, to actually cut off all funding to mainstream universities. Would that actually, unless they change their curriculum significantly, would that actually, would that actually work? At getting them to change, I don't know, probably somewhat. I mean, the really big universities like the Ivy League stuff. I'm sure they could find all the funding they could possibly ever need, because they're so well connected. But I doubt that every single university in America could afford to go on without any government funding indefinitely. The issue with that is it's just not really realistic that we'd be able to get such a wide sweeping policy passed. So it might theoretically be able to force some changes in academia, but I don't think we'll ever really be able to get a policy like that enacted.
that would be like telling the heart to stop beating blood to the brain.
Yeah. I mean, it's not impossible to have a more conservative university or to cut off, sort of discourage some of their worst excesses. It's just impossible to transform the entire system. At the stage we're at currently, at least.
What's that BoomerCon school? Is like Hillsdale?
Yeah.
I have a buddy who
That-
goes to
that-
Hillsdale.
The cringe boomer school. Sorry, I don't want to.
They're not that bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I don't know. It's I mean, there's lots of different strategies that could work. It's just what strategies could we actually be able to do? There's very few of those, and that's always the issue. So yeah, I don't know. Do we have anything else? Are we done?
I'm looking to wrapping up pretty soon here, an hour 30-minute mark. Gotta go.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, everyone has a YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe to everyone here. It's mandatory. Everyone in the audience, by the way. I don't support this obviously, but YouTube actually has this new system where it will ban your YouTube account if you don't subscribe to everyone after you watch a live stream. So just make sure subscribe to Settlers Lament. Go into the description. Subscribe to all those channels. You have to do it. It's mandatory. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. YouTube does. So you gotta do it. Does anyone have anything they want to say here at the end?
No.
Pray the rosary.
Yeah, pray the rosary every day. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everyone. Peace.